As Old as Time, Part 2. Mrs. Potts Loses Her Tea. Belle made her way back to the kitchen, the beast silently keeping up with her. Cogsworth awkwardly waddled behind them, obviously unsure whether to address his master or leave well enough alone. Lumiere appeared from behind a curtain. Belle could have sworn she heard giggling, and cocked his middle candle inquisitively at the expressions the strange little party had on. "Everything all right, mon chéri? Everything enjoying your stay?" he asked, making a magnificent little bow. "As much as I can," she said politely, trying not to sniff. "You were right about the library. It is fantastic. I'm enjoying it immediately." She tried to see the human in the little three-branch candelabrum, but when he was still he merely looked like a normal, if misplaced, taper holder, albeit with an arm twisted askew. There was no discernible eyes or features, not even in his flames. His name couldn't possibly have been Lumiere before the change, couldn't it have been? Belle had read in books by Defoe and others that in England, masters of great houses often renamed servants when they entered their hire. Manservants went by the names John and James far too commonly to have just randomly called that by their mothers. Had the beast taken away his name once the enchantress had taken away his body? "We're on our way to the kitchen," she said gently, kneeling down. "Would you like to come with us? I could carry you—" "Oh, no, mademoiselle," Lumiere said with another little bow. "I am on my way, elsewhere. Duties." Belle could actually hear the giggling behind the curtain this time. She tried not to smile, nor imagine what furniture could be behind closed doors. She would never look at a writing desk the same way again. Cogsworth was still, his face pointed at Lumiere. Belle wondered if he was frowning sternly. "I didn't realize you were trying to find a way to break the curse," Belle began awkwardly. Things had become so much more desperate and complicated now that these people's lives descended on her as well. "Of course you are," Lumiere said gamely. Was it just projecting, or did she hear a little bit of straight in his voice? "Where there is life, there is hope, no? Come along, anyway, Cogsworth. Let's let these young people work. And please, let us know if there's anything you can do, mon chéri." "Of course," Belle said. It was all she could promise. The two little creatures hopped off together, what passed for their heads pressed close, like two old soldiers hobbling off into the sunset. They whispered as they went, strange, high little sounds that both chilled and saddened Belle. The beast just waited expressionlessly for her to move again, and followed behind her. The kitchen was cheery and warm, a welcome relief to the dark hall and the sad revelations in the library. The stove was murmuring to itself, stirring the pots on its hob, and occasionally popping open its oven to adjust the temperature and check what was going on in there. Bright orange firelight sparkled against the spotless glass on the cabinets, and a bubbling tub full of soapy water had a brush that was vigorously scrubbing cups in it. "Goodness," Mrs. Potts said, spinning around from her perch at the prep table where she was addressing a cohort of silverware, surprised by her master's appearance. "I just set Cogsworth after to see if you had a hankering for anything in particular for dinner. It's so nice to have a real guest after all this time." She moved and bounced and burbled. Belle could have sworn there was a pink glow in her rounded cheeks. "We saw Cogsworth," Belle said politely, "but we were coming down to talk to you anyway." "Is everything all right?" Mrs. Potts practically hopped up and down, coming perilously close to the edge of the table to get closer to Belle. "Was the tea cold? I know we're not supposed to serve biscuits in the library, but if you had asked, maybe—" "What really happened to Elric?" the beast interrupted a little impatiently. Belle shot him a look. Could he really be that rude? Mrs. Potts also gave him a look. It was harder to read her because she had no eyes or mouth, but if Belle had to guess what expression it was, slack-jawed stupefaction seemed likely. "My... Mr. Potts," the teapot stammered. "Yes, your husband, Elric Potts, the stable-master. What happened to him?" the beast said. "What I think he's trying to say," Belle broke in, "is that we're working on a different angle to break the curse, and could use whatever information we have about any disappearances that may have occurred some years ago." "Elric Potts, the stable-master, your favorite servant, out of all of us," Mrs. Potts said slowly and calmly. "Yes, what happened to him? Why did he leave? My parents said he just abandoned you and his job, possibly because of me." "Because of you? It's been over a decade since his disappearance, and you're just asking that question now?" Thus far, Belle's only view of the housekeeper was of a lovely, fat little animated teapot, sympathetic, motherly, and kind. The tone she used now was not that of a housekeeper or of anyone sympathetic to anything. It was a dignified older lady filled with righteous affrontment. "I was a child. A lot was going on," the Beast said defensively. "The plague, my parents." "I see. Yet, now is the first time it has occurred to you to inquire what happened to a wayward servant? My favorite wayward servant?" She persisted, trilling her consonants. "Let me tell you about Elric Potts." She hopped up to the Beast so violently that her lid clacked up and down. Belle was tempted to reach out and steady it so it didn't fly off and break, but she was paralyzed by the woman's anger. "Elric Potts was the most kind, honorable, decent, caring man I've ever met," Mrs. Potts declared. A little puff of steam came out of her spot after each adjective. "Sometimes too kind. He didn't believe in treating anyone differently. Whether he was a prince or a gnome, he loved me and Chip and everyone in our family. Everyone in the castle. He loved you, Master, almost as much as his real son, and he loved his job in the stables. He loved those horses. I don't know what happened the night he never came home. I never found out. No one did. He was just gone, into, thin air, like everyone else. But through the plague and his wretched curse for over 10 years, I put on a brave face for our son who lost his father. Surely you can sympathize with that, can't you?" Belle risked a glance at the Beast. He looked shocked, and perhaps a little guilty. And then, blurble, to come, blorb, 10 years later, glug, and ask me. Mrs. Potts was quite literally boiling over. Belle was horrified and unsure what to do. Deadly hot tea began to bubble up through the tea kettle's spout and hold her top. The Beast also looked taken aback and moved slightly away. Eventually Mrs. Potts grew silent, shuddering and bubbling until she seemed to calm down. She stopped moving entirely, in fact, completely frozen. After a moment, Belle began to grow worried. "Mrs. Potts?" she said tentatively. Belle looked over at the Beast, who was also alarmed. The teapot looked like just a teapot now. There was nothing at all animated about her. And then she suddenly shook to life again, as if nothing at all had happened. I need to rest. This is just too much," she cried, spinning around and hopping off, spout in the air, trying to retain her dignity. Belle and the Beast watched her hop down into a chair, and then to the floor, and back to the pantry, her ringing clip-clop diminishing until they could hear her hopping off onto a shelf.